On December 15th, 1791, the U.S. Constitution was amended to include the Bill of Rights, which is the first 10 amendments to the U.S. Constitution. I think that the First Amendment to the Constitution is perhaps the most important amendment we have. It, of course, reads, "Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances." To sort of simplify that a little bit, the government cannot make any laws that restrict your freedom of speech, your free access to a free press, your freedom to practice any religion you like in any way you like, or your freedom to assemble and protest and petition the government to change things that you don't like. This, of course, doesn't mean that private entities cannot restrict any of these things. Of course, we see private companies like, for example, Sandia National Laboratories making significant laws respecting the freedom of speech of its employees. Obviously, the employees cannot share highly classified information with anyone they like. They couldn't publish the key secrets of Sandia National Laboratories. So that's an example of a more private entity restricting the freedom of speech of its employees. But for the sake of this video, I'll be focusing specifically on the government and its inability to pass laws restricting the freedom of speech. We, of course, have a few landmark Supreme Court cases which show that there are limitations to the First Amendment. Specifically, we see the Hazelwood Doctrine, the Bethelwood Doctrine, which state that publications can be censored for pedagogical concerns, and we see restrictions, slight restrictions on hate speech. We, of course, have libel law and copyright law. So there are restrictions to the freedom of speech and the freedom of press. But I don't think this makes the freedom of press any less important. I do believe it is the most important of the amendments, the most important right guaranteed to us as U.S. citizens. The purpose of the media is to give the people the information they need to be free and self-governing. So essentially, free press is what allows you to be free. The fact that you have access to all the information you need to make a decision is what allows you to rationally make that decision and choose the best course of action for yourself and to help choose the best course of action for the country. It's what allows democracy to happen. The Washington Post slogan right now is "Democracy dies in darkness," which of course means that when we don't have the information, when we're kept in the dark, we are unable to function as a democracy. We are unable to be rational media consumers, and we're unable to make decisions that will concern our entire lives. I believe people often forget about the First Amendment, specifically freedom of the press, when they're considering what might be the most important rights guaranteed to them. I think people would very quickly think of the right to bear arms as an important right. The right to vote, of course, is one of the very important rights. Freedom of speech, I think, would come up very quickly, and freedom of religion, but I don't believe freedom of press would enter many people's minds. I think a lot of people live with the idea that the media is false. The fake news trend, I believe, is still growing. More and more people claim to distrust the media. However, it is the best way for us to get the information we need to be free and self-governing, which of course is the basic tenet of democracy. Democracy means government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And the people cannot be rational voters, cannot govern themselves if they don't have the information they need. An example of this can be seen in China or North Korea, where the state controls the media. That means the current government gets to decide what gets to be published, what people get to know. And a way that that could affect us, let's just say for argument's sake, that suddenly there's no such thing as freedom of press in the United States. The First Amendment disappears. You no longer have the freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of press, or freedom to peaceably assemble. let's say that the press is state-owned, so of course there is media, but it's owned and run by the government. Whoever the current president or the current government was would get to decide everything you see. So let's say that the current government did not believe in renewable energy at all. They believed only in fossil fuels. They believed that those were the best way, and they believed that they just didn't want any renewable energy whatsoever. They could go so far as just to not allow any information about renewable energy to be published. That would be, I think, the minimum that would be done under that government that controlled the media in that way. The much more severe route, however, would be to go so far as to publish propaganda against renewable energy, to say perhaps that if you stand within 10 miles of a solar array, you will get cancer. Of course, there would be nothing to prevent them from publishing fake studies by fake doctors saying that living near a solar array caused fatal terminal cancer. They could say that windmills kill a majority of birds and bees in the United States, severely affecting pollination, affecting ecosystems. They could publish anything they wanted, and it, of course, does not have to be true. It can be propaganda because we don't have access to information to the contrary. And that's just one example, and that would, of course, affect our daily lives in so many more ways. It would be impossible to work in renewable energy. There would be no such thing as renewable energy. Of course, the environment would start to get worse and worse. Air quality would become much lower. Health would become much worse. So that is an example of how freedom of the press would directly impact our daily lives. Because, of course, if we are all led to believe one thing, then we will believe that thing because it's the only information we have. And we're still making decisions based on the media we see, but the media we see is telling us exactly which decision to make. And those are just a couple of the reasons that I think freedom of the press is the most important amendment to the Constitution. I believe it's the most overlooked, but of course we are guaranteed a right to get the information we need to be free and self-governing, which, I've said it before and I'll say it again, is the most important part of living in a democracy.